Hi, it's time for my weekly Facebook Live, and a lot of questions have been coming up lately about the process of autophagy, Autophagy. I guess I'm never quite sure about where the accent goes. And I've talked about it before, and I've answered a lot of questions about it, but I'm going to talk about it again a little bit today so that it's a recent video and newer people will be having less trouble finding it. And it's an important piece of the whole fasting thing. And it's one of the big reasons to do fasting, intermittent and extended. What is it? Autophagy is the simple process of cleansing the body of healthy and unwanted cellular debris. So as the cells mature and work in the body, they deteriorate and they need to be replaced. And eventually they get too old to repair and they need to be destroyed to make way for new cells. So the body has a process called apoptosis. Also, that's the formal name. It's programmed cell death, where the cells commit a kind of suicide when they reach a certain age. And this keeps the cell populations healthy and everything stays cleaned up. Autophagy is the process that occurs when only certain cell parts need to be replaced. It means literally to eat oneself. It's a regulated and an orderly process of breaking down and recycling cellular components that are no longer needed. And once the body gets rid of these, it can build new tissues and new cells. So the cells gets rid of unnecessary proteins that may be damaged or malfunctioning. And it recycles these into new cell components that are very valuable. Our bodies decide at each point whether to recycle or remove, and then sometimes those proteins are flushed out of the body. So when you go through autophagy, you allow your body to break down old mitochondria, the energy producers of the cell, destroy viruses and bacteria, and suppress chronic infections. So it's really, really good for your immune system as well as a lot of other things. An accumulation of these older cells and cell parts may be a factor in cancer, and it's certainly a part of aging. Higher levels of glucose, insulin, and proteins from the regular intake of food all turn off autophagy. But when you're fasting, the body realizes there's a shortage of nutrients and autophagy kicks in. It wants to conserve certain cell parts. The oldest and most worn out parts will get discarded and the amino acids are removed, taken to the liver, which uses them to make glucose or to make new proteins. So this can include scar tissue, excess skin tags, cancer cells, etc. So that's why the process of autophagy can be helpful with when you've lost a lot of weight and you have a lot of extra skin. It's not going to be a fast process, but you can eventually see some of that skin used up and get a little bit tighter. You also want to do exercise, and that's a different topic for a different Facebook Live. Eating anything will prevent autophagy from happening, and we'll get into that in a minute. Fasting also stimulates the growth hormone, which helps to produce new cell parts, all of which work significantly against aging. Autophagy is a tool against Alzheimer's as well, because there's an accumulation of amyloid beta proteins in the brain, which destroy the connections in the memory. So autophagy will remove clumps of these proteins, so it can be very effective against Alzheimer's disease, and cancer also seems to be related as a result of a dysfunctional autophagy process. Now, the big question always is, when does it happen? How long do you need to fast in order to have autophagy work? Well, it's not the same amount of time for everybody. Intermittent fasting, moderate length fast, and extended fast all offer some degree of boost to autophagy and apoptosis. So you'll get some benefit with any kind of length of fast. I found something that said fasting seems to start between 12 and 16 hours, and it will peak at hour 72, which is 3 days. So it seems that fasting longer than 3 days isn't necessarily going to give you more autophagy. It may give you a longer period of it, but I don't think it's necessary to fast even 3 days in order to have it. 1 day should give you some autophagy, and if you're doing 1 day every week, you should be having some period of that every week, which is going to have some real benefit for you. The more sugar stores you have in your liver, the longer time period it's going to take for autophagy to kick in. And also depends how else you're eating and what kind of exercise you're doing. If you're eating the low carb keto kind of way, you're going to get into autophagy sooner. If you're doing a lot of exercise, you're going to get into autophagy sooner. Water only is recommended for maximizing autophagy and apoptosis. Why? Coffee and tea contain trace amounts of amino acids and proteins, which may be counterproductive. Now, there is one study that I found that says that coffee may boost autophagy. So it's not quite clear. It would be black coffee, though. That's a case where if you do go with that theory, it must be black coffee. But that's only one study. So if you really, really want to be careful about that and you really want to fast for autophagy like 1 day a week, then I would even try to skip the coffee that day. If you can't, then have it black. But no tea. You just really want water. Water will ensure that those processes are not interfered with. Now, autophagy is suppressed in the presence of insulin resistance and high levels of insulin. And that's maybe one of the main mechanisms behind the effects of diabetes and obesity. So if you are someone who think you might have insulin resistance, again, you're going to need to fast probably for some times before you start to really see the autophagy kick in a very beneficial way. What turns off autophagy? Eating. Kind of a no-brainer. Glucose, insulin, and proteins all turn off the self-cleaning process, and it doesn't take much. Even a small amount of amino acid can stop autophagy cold. So even bone broth can turn that off. So that's why when people ask what they can have when they're fasting, there's a lot of liquids you can have, but it always depends what you're fasting for. If you're fasting for weight loss, you can get away with a little bit of cream in your coffee. You can have your coffee, you can have tea. Especially green tea can be really helpful to weight loss. Bone broth if you're really struggling to get through, but it will turn off the autophagy process. So you just kind of have to weigh it. Sometimes it's just more profitable to make sure you get through your fast and a different time you try for the autophagy piece. And autophagy is unique to fasting. It's not found in calorie restriction or in dieting. You will not get that benefit. It is essential to fast in order to get that. Now, you can get sick from too much autophagy as well as too little, which gets us back to the natural cycle of life, fasting and feasting, not constant dieting, not too much fasting. You need a balance because the cells need to grow during your eating time, and that's why you want really good quality, healthy food to nourish your cells when you are eating. So that's some things about autophagy. Any questions, feel free to ask. You can put something below. I'm not the world's expert on this, but I have done some research, and I do know it is a valuable thing to pursue and to consider when you're trying to make fasting a regular part of your life. I also want to say, I mentioned that insulin resistance will stop that process. If you have any suspicion, sorry, it's a hard word to say, that you have insulin resistance, if you have abdominal weight you can't lose, you've got family history of diabetes, you've got high blood sugars, you've been diagnosed as pre-diabetes or diabetic, you do have significant insulin resistance, and I have a special private purposeful nutrition coaching group over at Mighty Networks that where I really deal with reversing that insulin resistance, and fasting is a part of it, but we also really go through details of diet, deal with issues of sleep and stress and gut health, which are on exercise, which all factor into that. So I'm going to put a link at the top of this video where you can investigate more. Feel free to ask me questions about that too. It is a monthly subscription site. You do pay, but you don't have to commit yourself longer than a month. So if you get in and you're like, this isn't quite for me, you can easily leave again. But if you find that it's really something helpful, you can stay in as long as you want. So, and any of you women are invited to that. You said the focus is really breaking that insulin resistance, but many, many more people have insulin resistance than realize. So don't just discount, I don't have it. Investigate a little bit. I have a good article on it for those who sign up for my Purposeful Nutrition newsletter. And you can always ask me questions about it, and I'll be happy to answer. So thanks for watching, and have a great rest of the day.